The legislature looks at a new tax bill, one with cuts for many, but an increase for a powerful lobby. That rollback in the minimum wage, not so fast, says the governor and both political parties. A long time coming, a highway program approved and signed. But first, soft money, dark money, and Confederate memory. Arkansas Week coming up.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week, a busy news week and a busy legislative session, and we'll get to our Reporters Roundtable in just a moment. But first, some issues still hanging. Representative Jimmy Gazaway joins us, Republican of Paragould, Representative Charles Blake, Democrat of Little Rock, and Representative Mark Lowery, Republican of Maumelle. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in. Mr. Gazaway, I want to begin with you because one of the more sensitive issues that's come up in these days of the session is tenant rights. And it's kind of hit a roadblock for the time being at a minimum. Can you move this bill?
Sure. I think that we can. Currently, that bill is in the House Insurance and Commerce Committee, and I've had some meetings with the Realtors Association. What we're trying to do is bring a balance to our law. Currently, tenants in Arkansas have no rights. We're the only state in the country that doesn't recognize rights for tenants. And so there have been negotiations between the Landlords Association, the Realtors Association, the tenants' rights groups, and so I've been kind of in the middle of that, trying to work out a compromise so that we can bring some balance there.
Are you any nearer that?
And I think that we're close. So late yesterday afternoon, I got some language from the Realtors Association as far as what they would like to see in the form of some amendments. And I'm not sure that that's going to make them in support of the bill, but I think it will at least take away their opposition to the bill.
So it's acceptable to you?
It will be acceptable. We're going to present it to the committee, and we'll see what the committee has to say about it.
All right. Mr. Blake.
The positive thing, the encouraging thing that I've seen with HB 1410, the tenant rights bill, is that people who were questionable at the beginning I see people moving, and that may be from being more aware of the issues, more people, constituents who are reaching out and saying this is something that we need to see. There are over 1 million people who rent in the state of Arkansas, so that's something that I think is the will of the people. So it's encouraging to see where the bill where it was to where it is, and I think he has the votes.
Yeah. Mr. Lowery, you want in on this?
Well, as chairman of the committee, I feel like my responsibility is to bring this in for a landing. I mean, it's been out there for 6 weeks. The committee members are being bombarded by emails from both sides, and I think it's time to, take this hurricane and not let it be stalled over one committee, and just hear the remaining testimony, to hear the remaining changes. And so we're scheduled to meet Monday after adjournment of the chamber. The committee will meet and we'll take up that bill.
Well, Mr. Gazaway, your colleague says that you're close. Do you concur?
I've heard that that's not necessarily the case, but my job as chairman is not so much to sound in on, and I have not been sounding in on the debate, but just to make sure that everything is done in a fair and equitable process, and I think it has been. There's been plenty of testimony, but the problem is with it running so long, you have proponents and opponents that keep showing up expecting a vote, and so it's time to bring this in for a landing.
Okay, on to another issue because I have to, and that is dark money. You've been on the lead, at least anyway, in judicial races, Mr. Gazaway, and a stumble there.
That we ran into some difficulty on the House floor.
Not your stumble necessarily, but I mean the bill.
Yeah. So we ran into some difficulty on the House floor that really was unexpected. The bill ran in the Judiciary Committee, which I'm a member of, and passed overwhelmingly. I think there were two no votes, and the rest of the committee were all in favor. And then we get onto the House floor and we face some more difficulty there. So I'm looking at to try to satisfy some concerns of some different groups. You know, Arkansas Right to Life had some concerns that I wasn't aware of until the last minute. Family Council had some concerns that were kind of expressed to me at the last minute. And so trying to bring those groups together and see if we can't work something out.
Gentlemen, I think in one race alone, and that was Justice Goodson's $2.5 million.
Right.
I think I have to
commend
Representative Gazaway for wanting to let, if there are concerns, him being able to, and I've seen him do that over and over, pull the bill down to make the bill better in some people's eyes. Because to be honest, we felt like he had the votes on the House that day, and if he can make it a stronger bill to get more votes, you know, that's something that's encouraging as well. But it's just something that needs to be done. If people don't want to be known publicly, if they're giving money to races that have gotten a little off the rails here in the last election cycle, I mean that's something that we have to address. If you're going to be something, and you mentioned it, the Justice Goodson race, you know, it was some things that was on TV that was offensive, and we should be knowing who's putting money behind those type ads.
Yeah, Mr. Lowery.
Well, I think the last minute concern that Representative Gazaway said was discussed.
Particularly among social conservatives.
Right, and the unintended consequences, and we just have to make sure that the language is tightened up, and I appreciate the Representative Gazaway did pull the bill down so that those concerns can be addressed. Make sure that you're not infringing upon the rights of some of the social conservative groups of sounding in on election issues. And so we'll see how that language goes, and I'm sure we'll be seeing the vote on that sometime next week.
Where's the infringement?
The concern is that if they are involved, a 501c3, or in some cases they have C4s, they're involved in advocacy, that this is going to the unintended consequences that they would have to reveal all the contributors, the donors of their organization, not necessarily the campaign itself or the direct donations to the campaign infrastructure, but to the organization itself. And they feel like that has a chilling effect on their ability to do what they're doing in terms of advocacy.
Yeah, Mr. Gazaway, the last word on this one.
Well, if you look at what's happened in our last election cycles with respect to our Supreme Court and appellate court races, in the 2018 judicial election cycle for Supreme Court, 94% of the television advertising was paid for by independent expenditure committees. And we don't know who's behind that message. And so ultimately, you know, this is about transparency. This is going to say if you're going to try to tear down a candidate, if you're going to try to prop up a candidate, the public deserves to know who's behind that message so that they can make a fair and informed decision.
And still on the agenda, Mr. Blake, let me move on, but I have to.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And that's your legislation regarding the Arkansas flag.
Yes. Well, this is the second bill that I filed this session. As you know, the first bill was tabled in the state agencies while I wasn't in the room. So got with some other representatives. I listened. Representative House had he wanted to put a hostile amendment on the first bill, which would move the United States Star to the top and move the Confederate Star to the bottom. I think I met him in the middle and compromised, moving the United States Star to the top, but still making sure that our Native American nations are represented on our state flag. So those three stars on the bottom will still represent France, Spain, but now the Native American nations. I've actually visited with Representative Gazaway and the governor. We're working to make sure we're changing, hopefully changing some people's minds. I think it's a good bill. I think it's it should be a easy yes vote. When you look at the context of when that star was added, it shouldn't be issues. So what we're trying to do is move forward, move our state forward.
You've been an ally, Mr. Gazaway, conceptually anyway.
That's right.
Did you anticipate the opposition?
I didn't anticipate that it would be as strong as it has been. You know, this is an important bill for our state, I think. We have to recognize in our state that we need to make an effort for the hundreds of thousands of people who this causes a great deal of pain for. And just as I sat in committee, one of the committee members, and really what turned my position even more strongly in favor of Representative Blake's bill, was one of the committee members was bawling in the committee because, you know, this issue causes her such great pain. And so we have to recognize that. We have to make an effort to reach out and to understand where people are in our state. And I commend Representative Blake for what he's doing here.
Yeah, Mr. Lowery.
Well, Representative Blake references the context of when this star was added, and the context is that the Democrat Party was in control of every position, the legislature, the governor's office in 1924. And I think that we start going down a wrong road when we're trying to erase the vestiges of history. I mean, that's a historical truth, and I know it's an unfortunate historical truth for the Arkansas Democratic Party. But I just don't know that we should be going through and purging history just because it's an inconvenient blip in history.
More than inconvenient, Mr. Blake?
That argument there is it's sad. It's sad because this is not a political party bill. This is an Arkansan bill. It doesn't matter what party put the star. A wrong is a wrong. If the Democrat does it or a Republican does it. So what we're saying here is that we don't have to erase history. History will never change. Arkansas was a Confederate state. What we're changing is our biggest symbolism of our state, and that's our state flag. What we're honoring every single day. What we're teaching our grade school kids. What being an Arkansan means. The symbolism of our state. So I don't understand how we can look at a flag and say we're going to be better by changing a flag that was put on in 1924. That was, yes, there was a Democratic majority in the House, but at the same time you have to understand the context of 1924. And if you're not courageous enough to look out and say what was happening in our state in 1924. And if you have to have those concerns, and if you don't, and if it's only about Democratic and Republican issues, then you're missing the boat here. And I'm proud of Representative Gazaway. I'm proud of Governor Hutchinson for coming out and saying we're going to be on the right side of history, and saying that we're changing something that should have never happened.
All right. With that, we simply have, well, one more quick question, and it's got to be very quick. Mr. Hutchinson has indicated, no surprise, that he'd like you guys to leave town pretty quickly. Now, we've got a Medicaid appropriation coming up. Do you see a problem with it, even if there's an adverse ruling, in the pending litigation regarding Arkansas and Kentucky work requirements? Mr. Gazaway?
Well, we'll have to see what happens, with respect to a ruling, but ultimately I don't think so. I think that Arkansans have come to accept, and even those in the legislature, that this is where we are with respect to Medicaid funding, and I don't see it as being a problem.
Mr. Blake?
I don't see it as being a problem.
Mr. Lowery?
Well, the legislative process has been bogged down by the 2,050-page transformation bill. The Bureau of Legislative Research was not able to do their work in working with us, and so we feel like we should be given the opportunity to act upon all this other legislation that's pending, and that we shouldn't be in a hurry.
All right, got to end it there. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being part of the program. Hope you come back soon.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. And we're back with our roundtable. Benji Hardy from the Arkansas Nonprofit News Network, Steve Brawner, an independent journalist and reporter for Talk Business and Politics, as is Wesley Brown. Gents, thanks for coming in. Before we go with some more recent news, here's a clip from about 10 days ago. We were preempted last week by a sporting event, but there was an exchange before in a Senate committee that went viral, as it were, and some people still 10 days later find it gripping. Here's an excerpt.
And it doesn't take much to look on the local news every night and see how many black kids, black boys, black men are being killed with these stand your ground defenses that these people raise. Then they get off. So I take issue with that. I'm the only person here of color, okay? I am a mother, too. And I have a son. And I care as much for my son as y'all care for y'all's. But my son doesn't walk the same path as yours does. So this debate deserves more time.
Stephanie Flowers, Democrat of Pine Bluff, addressing so-called stand your ground legislation still in committee. Into more recent news. Gentlemen, thought we were on the downhill side of the legislative session, and suddenly the pro tem and some colleagues with bipartisan bill, a new tax bill, $100 million in reductions with some offsets from big tobacco.
It's a one-to-one offset. It's $100 million in tax cuts. There's an income tax credit involved, lower income taxes. And to offset it, Senator Hendren's bill would raise taxes by about 80 cents a pack on cigarettes, and would enact about a 67% tax on e-cigarettes, which are really exploding in popularity among young people. And right now, they're not taxed at all beyond just a regular sales tax. So this is the latest one. It's late in the session. It's got a lot of co-sponsors on the bill, but also that it will have a lot of opposition as well.
EITC figure.
Right. I mean, this is something that Arkansas Advocates has been, for children and families, has been calling for a long time. And
it's a tax bill advocates like.
Right. I mean, it's fairly remarkable. I mean, you have the Republican leader of the Senate advocating for this. I mean, what's a fairly progressive tax? And he I believe, acknowledged that Arkansas's tax structure overall is fairly regressive. If you shift more of the revenue equation onto sales tax, that means that lower income people are going to be paying a larger proportion of the overall revenue share, as opposed to, say, income taxes or property taxes. So, I mean, in giving this EITC, it's something that benefits lower income families. There's also some adjustments to the tax tables that would, I think, eliminate the 2% rate for lower income earners up to a certain level. And increase the standard deduction. So overall, I mean, it's a package that is beneficial to lower income earners.
And Wes, it's a package the administration, Mr. Hutchinson says he can, that's okay, but can you do some other things for me in the meantime?
Yeah, well, I think the basis of the argument for it is we go to the healthcare issue, that smokers are put an extra burden on the healthcare system. So this bill, and the argument is going to be, this bill is to offset to bring a little bit balance back where the smokers who have caused lead to heart disease and other issues, lung disease and other issues in the healthcare system will have to pay their so-called fair share of the burden of that. And that's the argument that's going to be made in committee. That's the argument going to be made to get this deal through. But as Steve noted, there's a lot of opposition. There's going to be opposition to it because anytime you say the word tax cut at the Capitol, there's always going to be debate on both sides of that issue.
Sure, but given the state's fiscal situation, the architecture that's been altered during this legislative session so far, it would appear to be very much in the administration's interest, the state's interest, that it be revenue neutral. From this point forward.
And supposedly it is.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, just like all of the tax bills in this session, they have a little bit complexity. You have to figure out an equation to figure out how you look at the highway bill. It's part of this and a little bit of that, and same way with this. You're going to have a little bit of a magician to figure out how it's going to work if it's passed out of the committee and goes to the Senate floor and the House floor.
Well, and as is often the case, you need several months after enactment to see exactly how it shakes out, because it doesn't always produce or cut as much as it can. But let's go ahead and do highways. Steve, Mr. Highways. After years and years and years, we got a bill, we got a program.
Right, and as soon as the bill takes effect or the law takes effect, Arkansans are going to pay 3 cents more a gallon for gasoline and 6 cents more for diesel.
At the wholesale level.
But it also ultimately it will come down to what we pay at the pump. And then also, if you have a hybrid or electric car, you're going to pay a little bit more on your registration fees. And finally, there's some of the gambling revenues are going to go to highways. So about $95 million, very sought after by the highway Commission Highway Department. But still, it's only 1/3 of the governor's total highway plan. The rest of it we're going to vote on in November.
Mm-hmm. And that's, yeah.
The 2 cent, an extension of the half-cent sales tax. Right now, it ends in 2023. This make it permanent.
Outlook?
Yeah, I think you're going to have strong support. You got the chamber. The argument that was made in both committees, in
mayors,
the Senate,
county judges.
Yeah, everybody is supporting this from the chamber
motorists.
down. Yeah, everybody. And my neighbor down who hates taxes to be raised is in support of this because we need better highways. So you're going to have a big a promotional. A lot of money behind it when the campaign goes to the voters, and I think it's going to have strong support.
Multiple legislators.
It's just, I mean, it's interesting when you think about these. So many proposals to session have to do with income and with just which people are paying what into state revenue. You see, you have this massive income tax cut that benefits higher earners, and that coupled with the governor asking for voters to approve a permanent extension of a half-cent sales tax does make the tax structure more aggressive overall. But now with this new proposal on the table that sort of would swing into the other direction, there's just an interesting sort of calculation here going on in the Republican majority, it seems like, about who are you asking to pay what?
Okay. And a question worth pursuing in a subsequent program. Anyway, we got 3, I think, pieces of legislation to roll back the minimum wage initiative, which voters approved last November, and there was an immediate pushback to the pushback.
Yeah, I was
almost
at the political animals, and the question was asked of the governor, would he support this? And I think he was also asked in an earlier press conference that he gave on the highway bill. But then he came out very strongly on Wednesday at the political animal and said, I won't back this. I won't even support the bill that was actually almost at the same time just came out of a committee. So I think basically this bill is DOA. You don't have support in the Senate for it. Both parties, the Democratic Party leaders, the Republican Party leaders who were at the political animals, all have said they won't back this. But the sponsor, I think Steve wrote a story, the sponsor said that she's still going to run that bill. So, but I still don't think it'll have. I think it have the support for it.
Approved by what? I think about 68% of the popular vote.
Yes, and even the Republican Party of Arkansas even came out against it. So, but the sponsor, Representative Robin Lundstrom, plans to keep pushing it through. There's the belief that certain groups, small businesses, nonprofits, are going to be hurt by this. But at this point, with the governor coming out strongly against it, it seems like it's a non-starter.
And quickly, the reorg. The last major thing on the administration's agenda, I guess, is the governmental executive reorganization that the legislature has to go along with.
Representative Lowery mentioned it, and one of the things that is happening in both the House committee and the Senate committee, they are going over every jot and tittle of this transformation bill. I actually downloaded the bill. It's 2,049 pages.
On what?
On every. There's 15 cabinet secretaries that are going to be created, and it has every detail of those departments that these secretaries are going to run. And over in the Senate, they're going through scrutinizing every detail of this. So the fact that the governor said we want to get out of this session in a few weeks, if this bill may take a little while before it continues to move along and is eventually approved by both the House and Senate.
And Mr. Hutchinson was hoping out loud this past week that the General Assembly would soon start putting together the Revenue Stabilization Act. Still pending. Of course, that would involve the Medicaid budget, Benji, and there were some arguments in a federal courtroom this past week that could have a bearing on that.
Right. So at long last, Arkansas's work requirement in the Medicaid program that's attracted so much attention got its stay in federal court. Judge heard oral arguments yesterday, and he said at the conclusion of the hearing that he hoped to have a decision out by the end of the month, which would be significant because that March 31st cutoff date is when we'd start to see more beneficiaries losing coverage in 2019, which has yet to happen. If the judge does put a block on the work requirement, though, that could I mean, who knows what effect that will have in the legislature, which still has yet to approve the Medicaid budget. In 2018, the governor avoided the big fights we've seen in past sessions, in part because that work requirement, I mean, I think convinced a lot of more conservative legislators to go along with the package and vote for the budget last year. So whether something could rebel this year, we'll see.
Well, Mr. Hutchinson and Pro Tem Hendren as well, I'm pretty sure they have both talked about the Medicaid expansion is just intrinsic to budgeting today. It's just woven into the fabric of budgeting today.
Yeah, it is, and as they, once the timing of that decision is going to be interesting, and if they may have to come if you end the session, they may have to come back because that issue is going to, especially if it's an adverse issue where they have to go back and reduce anything on the Medicaid, they may have to come back to the Capitol and address that issue.
I think it's just a matter of, is there appetite really among the more conservative Republican legislators to fight this losing battle all over again?
Yeah.
All right, we got to end it there, gentlemen, because we're out of time. Thanks to you guys for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.